Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. If we can share, rate, review, subscribe, all the things, that's what get the word out about what we do. Our guest today is Margarita. She's actually been in boating since she was a child. She's been an entrepreneur since she was 18, so her whole life. Now she runs Women in Boating. She's got a podcast and all that stuff. We'll have all that stuff in the show notes, by the way. And she's passionate also about self-care. And so has got into biohacking and a lot of different versions on that. So we'll kind of see where this goes today, but I'm really excited to have you. Thanks for being on, Margarita.
Thank you so much, Angela. It's a real privilege. I'm excited we finally made the time. So what would you like to know?
Well, let's get into things. So women in boating, what caused you to start to get into that industry as a young woman in a male-dominated world? And, tell us a little bit about that journey. Where do you see it going? What are you passionate about? And where does this self-care fit into all of that?
Well, thank you for summing it all up. So I was always very active and passionate. I love to be outside all the time. So when I was in high school, I was looking to make money because I always like to make money. And I found this job working on boats. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. I can get some sun. I can, be physically active, stay fit, and learn about something more that I love. So I started working for somebody, and soon along came an opportunity for me to start my own business. My mom handed me business cards when I was 18 years old, and I started getting a reputation for doing high quality work and getting it done in a timely manner. So I was picked up by brokers who wanted to sell their boats. I was also introduced to a director shipyard, which they built boats up in the millions back then. $20 million boat back then. It was, pretty big boat. Now they're probably 350 million, right? So that was a really exciting time for me. I trained most of my friends. I have trained actually almost 350 people. When I was younger, I wrote my own training manuals because I figured out I don't like to repeat myself more than once. So the best way for me to get the message out was to have systems and processes in my business. So, my early 20s, I just started putting all this stuff together. I created a dispatch and, for time efficiency, I really enjoyed making money and winning and being timely, even though we had all these elements of weather and, the other vendors and contractors before us that could interrupt our, end game. I had to get creative and work around them and still get the boats ready for our customers. So it was really fun. It was a really fun time in my life. I made a lot more money than my friends. I love to travel. And I also learned that I could not be sick because I enjoyed life too much. So that's how come I got self-care involved in my life at such a young age. So so we worked on boats. I've worked on boats up to 400 feet. And it's, from anything from just doing light cleaning to total restoration. We like to find the safest methods to work on the boats. I learned also at a very young age that there was a lot of toxicity in the industry, and I saw people get sick, and it didn't make sense, a lot of the systems that were introduced to me. So I always wanted to find better solutions. So I did a lot of research and found great products. I had to go out of the country sometimes, like Canada and California also usually was a little more cutting edge when it came to bringing in greener methods. So I learned, about vapor steam and different types of restoration products that were safer for the health of the boat, the environment, and the people. It's all the same. I really cared about my guys and knew that one day they would have kids, and, whatever they were putting in their hands, they were breathing and they were touching their bodies. And so we had to find the best ways to do things.
Oh, that's interesting. So you went into more natural stuff that would go on these boats and that kind of thing. What have you found with with women in business and in boating? and if anyone's watching, like Margarita is a very feminine woman. I don't know how to put that. Like she's a woman, like, and I love it. And so like, how did you find that? And how did you negotiate, being that woman in a quote man's world? And what were some of the things that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I never dated in my industry. That's what I had. One of my rules were not dating where, I ate. So I sort of just did my own thing. I didn't really network. I probably should have done a little bit more networking, but I was, good looking and really fit when I was young. So, the boys would definitely find that interesting. I just completely ignored them and just went from a whole, I was in business practically the whole time. So, I always knew that I had to be better than everybody else in order for them to take me seriously, because it's a very macho industry. So they look at a girl and they start, assuming that they don't really know what they're talking about. And they're always looking at the guy, Even now you find that too, when you start to open up your mouth and you have a whole lot to say, and you find solutions for them very quickly, they really take you very seriously. So, people were hiring me because they knew I ran a tight ship and they knew that I was on top of my guys. I made sure that I hired the best or trained them really well because I cared about the end result. So, I still was really feminine in the industry. I actually was kind of clueless when I was younger. I didn't even know that people knew about me. I just went on my merry way. I didn't think about the politics. I just always wanted to be a high performer. And I knew that if I was always being, presenting my best self at work, then I would be a good leader. So for me, it was all about, leading a team and teaching them about good work ethics, being reliable, having the best communication that we could possibly have, because men and women do communicate differently. I learned that. It took me a little longer to learn that than I probably would have benefited me to learn that a little more when I was younger. I did take a course called Understanding Men, Satisfying Women by Allison Armstrong, because it was extremely helpful. It talked about, they explained about how women, our brains are wired completely differently. Men are super single focused. And, I started paying attention to how men got interrupted if you were trying to present something with them. And I, started asking for an appointment to talk to them if it was really important, or, really excusing myself for interrupting them, respecting their single focused mind. And, I would get more out of the relationships when I learned more about them. So it was very valuable. And, men definitely have a different way of doing things. Not some men are better at multitasking, but women, I could be like spinning plates and dancing on a ball and, won't drop anything. I'm pretty good at that. And learning about men also helped me with my training methods, helping set structures up. And I also believe that in the balance of having men and women working together, can be extremely positive. So
I agree.
Yeah. So, I was one of the first women to have a business in the industry that wasn't my parents or my husband's. And most people didn't really understand that back then. They were just like, who's this girl? What does she think she's doing?
I want to touch on something you've mentioned a few times before get off of it. You mentioned a few times you're a high performer and you're really driven to win. Where did that come from?
Well, I actually just figured out this fairly recently. I was, I actually have Spartan blood in me. I'm 100% Greek and I have Spartan blood, and we're definitely warriors. Like, I look at my mom's side of the family, that's where it comes from. And I've seen so much resilience in actually both sides of my family. They both came over here from Greece. They both left everything. They both started, both sides, but When it comes with challenges, and I've been, exposed to a lot growing up, and, seeing my grandparents go through things, and even my mom particularly, they just don't give up, and I think that is really innate in me for sure. So the drive to win is survival. It's survival for me. But obviously I don't want to like take anybody out, kind of thing. Like I'd like to bring them with me, honestly. I feel like
Lovingly win.
Collaboration is where I really find the strongest, I think the strongest relationships are, good relationships that you can collaborate with, because winning alone is kind of lonely, you want to win together. So, also I think that, people in my life had shown me that too, growing up, the relationships that I had with different people. I was more connected with people that were high performers. That was a very strong attraction to me. So
interesting. So I think if anyone's listening, like I think that the biggest thing is when you have that will to win and that high performing, really you figure out everything else. When you really want it, you figure out like the women in a male industry or like a new industry, or like, you just want it so bad. And do you think there's anything that helps someone? Like, it sounds like you had a really good role models. You had some really good role models that showed that. And so that's where that kind of came from. But I feel like a lot of kids and then into adulthood are really beat down and aren't told, especially I'm going to say women, that they can be all they can be. And what does that actually mean? And, and so they settle. And, I know the people listening to this don't ever want to settle. Are there some things that you think of, you've been thinking about this kind of, that would help someone build that will to win? Like, are there things that you think someone could do or read or listen to or develop, that you think are really instrumental in continuing or getting that will to win?
Well, I think people need to get in touch with what they're passionate about. I think that's where a lot of drive comes from, is this inner fire, and developing that inner fire, and how to keep that flame going is the most important thing. Because honestly, there's so many people that tell me that I can't do something, and that has become a motivation for me. If I really want it, you could hear all the negative talk. I mean, my mom basically said to me, because when I started working on boats, nobody thought, oh, that's not women's work. Like, what are you doing that for? You should be answering phones, or, I don't know, going shopping, babysitting,
No.
whatever, teaching. And my mom's like, well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. And she handed me my business cards, hands on deck. And so she was like, well, you got to be the boss if you're going to do it. And so that was my mom was a super motivating factor. She also had to step in to her, her strengths, because my dad lost his business and we were making like really good money. I mean, we weren't, my dad was, and for the family, and my mom was playing tennis, and she had a little like club life, and she was president of the Philipticos, which is like this Greek Orthodox church, women's club that helps support the church and help build the church. And she had, president of the women's club, so my mom was always like leading teams. Mm-hmm. And I just think that if you are passionate about something and you want to tap into that fire, that will really help you. So fanning that flame, whatever that takes, unloading things. Sometimes it's a process of unloading your belief systems, maybe taking a retreat, blocking out everything and just diving into yourself. I did a lot of self-care when I was younger. I started going to do yoga. I would drive up to Kripalu, which is in Lenox, Massachusetts, on a Friday with my bag packed, that, even if I didn't have my bag packed, I would just go, because it was such a stressful time for me to do all this educating. And I had like 15 guys working for me. And I'm like, oh my God, what do? I need to just unplug. So I drive up there and sign up for something. And in 3 days, I'd be a new person. I'd come back in, I'd be refreshed. I'd, unload all my beliefs that were preventing me from being my best. And I did a lot of physical and mental self-care. And I think that process of unloading and rebooting your system, I used to, like you have to dump your computer sometimes in order for it to work better. That's super important. So self-care is critical as an entrepreneur. It has to be the number one priority. I think that whatever that means to each individual, that would be really good. And obviously hearing, positive things all the time.
So helpful. Yeah. And you mentioned associations was something else, that you were around high achievers. And as you went through that, you started so young. So a lot of times what people struggle with is, and your parents were, quote, supportive, which a lot of people struggle with. Were there some times in there that you didn't, like, you had to separate from people and it was really hard? Because I know that's a big thing for a lot of people, is they, do stuff and then their friends that they were with are like, what are you doing? And then they have this like, separation, and it's really hard for a lot of people. Do you remember going through those times as you, grew up with friends or people that were like, what are you doing? You're into biohacking, you're doing all these different things as you go. And you're redefining yourself and reinventing yourself, which I think is awesome. But a lot of people don't necessarily think that's awesome. So how did you navigate some of that? If you remember some specific kind of ideas on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was alone a lot, in my mind. So I have a lot of friends. I would throw parties and invite them, and, they would see me change. And I think my own personal success and my reputation really helps that for people to trust me. I walked my walk, I talked my talk. And, that's really hard for people not to notice. I'm a super consistent person. If you met my best friend, I still talk to her. We don't see each other very often. We've definitely drifted in certain ways because of who she is, but she would be right on the first people on my party list I would invite her to. I'd probably invite 200 people to a party, and they'd be a giant melting pot. And, everybody would have stories to share about experiences, and it'd be really fun. But, I've been really consistent as a person. So, and I definitely have a ton of energy. So usually when somebody needs something, my attention, I tap into it for them. And that's been, I think that by helping others, you also build trust too. So I've definitely learned to keep boundaries, better boundaries as I got older, because sometimes that can distract you from where you really need to be. But they're loving boundaries. Sometimes they have to be, lost for a little longer than you want them to be. But, we have end game in mind. If we have an end game in mind, then, there might be room for them to come in later on. But, you have to make these decisions, and it's tough love. So but if I continue, I was told by a friend of mine's mom a long time ago, like, a rolling stone gathers no moss, right? So, and she always said, no moss will ever grow under Margarita's feet, because she knew me, my parents' friends knew me, they saw me, so, yeah.
I like that. And then you've got into, we'll touch a little bit on this too. You've got into biohacking. And because your self-care is really important to you. So you really got into that. Tell us, where do you see that going, and what's your mission with that?
So, well, I also learned when I was younger that self-care really helped me with mental clarity. And when you have a problem that arises, you have to have clarity to make a decision quickly. So I have 4 yoga certifications. I studied Thai massage, Reiki. I've traveled all over the world learning about self-care, taking these 1-month retreats, living in a tent for a month in the Bahamas, doing meditation, yoga, chanting. Like I did, I threw myself into these situations that I had no idea what I didn't even know what the results would be, but I was drawn to them, like intuitively. I was drawn to them, and I'm like, I knew I needed it. And so, learning at a young age in my late 20s, early 30s, that how that could transform me personally. Like I was doing infrared sauna 25 years ago, like now they're popular, right?
Right.
So I sort of I was a visionary, and putting those pieces of the puzzle together helped me create balance in my life so I could be more for others. So my biohacking journey at a young age helped me actually stay healthier in the industry. I was exposed to heavy metals and I had no idea. And, there's a point in time about 6 years ago that, I couldn't lose weight. I was blowing up. My hair was falling out, like just pulling. It was crazy how sick I was. I brain fog, like it was difficult for me to remember things. And because I have such a will to survive, I just did everything I possibly could. And I met this doctor along the way who I've created a very strong relationship with. He saved Tony Robbins' life. He worked with Suzanne Summers, New York Mets, New York Knicks. Now he's working with the New York Yankees. And we have built a relationship to work with some of these devices that I'm working with now that I've personally used on myself for my self-care, and has really helped me feel younger, which is, I think, a key factor to being a high performer. And so eventually we're going to have a center. I do have a dream of having a center with boats, along the water. And I'd love to restore old boats and make them into treatment rooms. Like that's something that has been in my mind. I thought would be so cool for people to come by boat and also have a center on land. And, so that's in my, if you read my website, nauticaldetails.com, you'll see it's been written there. And I completely forgot about it actually. And then all of a sudden stuff started to, happen for me with these relationships. And, it's going to be closer than I think, actually. So it's pretty exciting. I tell my customers, I have very high performing customers, that pay a lot of money to have their boats perfect. And, they know that my bar is really high in my self-care. I've always been involved in anti-aging medicine for boats and people too. So it's very similar. And they're interested in the anti-aging medicine, the biohacking devices that I have. We have conversations about them all the time. So they're sort of waiting for me to have this other division of my life come together very soon. I would say by September, I'll be in full swing with that aspect. So no center yet, but we're going to have a facility locally that we're going to be doing some of these techniques. And
oh, that's so exciting. I love that.
Yeah.
And by the way, guys, we'll have all the links and the, website, all that stuff in the show notes. So definitely check things out for sure. In wrapping up, I always ask 3 final questions and then anything that we didn't touch on that we just really should touch on to leave our listeners with. So first final question, you touched on this a little bit, but someone's looking for their purpose. What's one sentence you would say that could help them find it?
I always ask this question to the college kids that work for me because I work with a lot of college kids. I do a lot of internship type of stuff, but also teach them entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. So I always tell them, I always ask them, what would you do for free that you would love to do to help anybody, it would help anybody to do? What is something that's so easy for you to do that you do so, would do for free? And if you could make money doing that, what would that be? No matter if it could be, taking care of animals or, helping somebody build a house and I try to dig into what they are passionate about. And then I take that information and talk about the opportunities that they can do, as an entrepreneur with that idea. Or perhaps it's something they can do with school, but it really has to come from a place of ease and love. I think that's a lot of our purpose is a very natural trait that we have. And then we have to take time to develop it, obviously,
Number 2 question. What's a favorite quote and why?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, what comes to mind? I'm sure there's lots because I love quotes. So
yes,
but what's one that comes to mind that you should think of?
I mean, I don't know. I have my own quote that I have for my business. It's called "Whatever can shine will shine."
I like it.
So that's something to me that, it's just about finding, the beauty in things. So, and sometimes you have to take some time to figure out how to clean up, get the dust off to bring out the brilliance. So that's one of the things that
Whatever can
I,
shine will shine. I love it. It's so good. And then last question is, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
on my what?
Your gravestone.
She never gave up.
I like that. That's cool. So you run into someone at a coffee shop. They're like, Margarita, that's amazing. You're in boats, you're in biohacking, you're doing all these things. It's really cool. And what is something that we didn't touch on that you think we should have touched on that would just really impact our listeners?
I didn't talk about my daughter, and I have an incredible daughter that was born with a club foot due to my heavy metals, and is a major challenge in my life. And she's unbelievable. Like, I wish she was here. She could tell her run up to she's like my assistant. She's probably the best assistant I could ever possibly have. It is so important to be present for your children. When you have children, pouring into them at a very young age, you don't realize how much they're listening and how much they see you, and will imitate what you do. And I'm so grateful that I was older when I had her, because I had so much more to provide for her, just she would come with me to these yoga centers, and I'd bring a childcare person, and she'd want to sit with me and lecture and listen to what these people were talking about. So she also has a lot of awareness, and she just got an award for the Thinker Award at school. Okay. And it talks about how she is very solution oriented and very mature with the way she finds solutions to problems. And she's 14 years old. So it makes me pretty proud to have her with me. So yeah, so that's even though that's completely off topic.
I love it though, taking a challenge and turning it into a positive. And for anyone listening with kids, that is so cool. Or if you have nieces or nephews or whatever, like, taking them into those experiences, like that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, she was born with a club foot, so it was turned inward and upward. And the first day she danced, I cried, and she got her black belt at 10. She sings, she's in theater, she does volleyball, she plays tennis, she's a great athlete, and she's also is making $25 an hour at 14 years old while her friends are, babysitting and, at grocery marketplaces and as a cashier. So she's, doing pretty well. She'll be in Greece this summer for 3 weeks. So she's saving money.
Wow. But, that's so cool at 14 years old. Like, and I think, I listened to how your parents were, and, if someone's listening to this and they're like, well, my parents like weren't your parents, like they were not supportive, they were not around, whatever it is, you can also switch that and, switch who you are. It's not your parents that define you. But if you are a parent, you can help define your kids. That's for sure, and help them grow. So I just think that's very impactful. So really appreciate you being on. Guys, let's go out there. Let's change one life or one starfish at a time. If together we can change one life at a time, together we can change the world. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate your time. Thank you.